Imagine a life steeped in voodoo, blood rituals, and human sacrifices, where Gideon Mulenga, a former high-ranking Satanist, once thrived. But in 2004, everything changed. He encountered the raw power of Jesus Christ, ripping him from the depths of evil. His miraculous transformation is a powerful reminder that no soul is too lost to be saved. This is part 1 of Gideon's testimony. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. We present testimonies about Jesus, the afterlife, heaven and hell, and other Bible-related topics in story form once or twice a week. Thank you to everyone supporting the channel. Now let's get into today's story. My story began with a darkness that ran deep through my family, a shadow that seemed inescapable. My mother was initiated into Satanism by her own mother, just as her mother had been before her. It was as if a generational curse had taken root, passing from one generation to the next, until it finally reached mine. But by the grace of God, everything changed when I surrendered my life to Jesus. I never imagined that God would forgive someone like me, but His mercy is boundless, reaching even into the darkest corners. Let me take you back to where it all began. My mother, driven by desperation and the need for money, sought guidance from her own mother. My grandmother, already deeply entrenched in witchcraft and a devoted member of a voodoo group, claimed to have the answers my mother was seeking. However, those answers came with a heavy and terrifying cost. My grandmother assured my mother that she could reveal the path to wealth. And so my mother was taken to the Western Indies, where she was initiated into the mysterious and dangerous practices of voodoo. When my mother was initiated, she was given strict rules and rigid laws to live by. She was instructed that she must never have children, and she must never marry. But life, as it often does, took a different turn when she returned to Zambia. She met a man, fell in love, and got married, defying the very rules she had been sworn to uphold. That man became my father, and despite the ominous warnings, I was born into this world, a life that was never part of the original plan. When those who had initiated my mother discovered that I had been born, they demanded my life as a form of payment for the transgression. My mother was suddenly faced with an impossible decision. How could she take the life of her own child? The pressure she endured was intense and unrelenting, but despite it all, she refused to kill me. However, the consequences of her defiance were still severe. She was told that if she wouldn't take my life, she must sever her ties with my father. Unable to withstand the threats any longer, she ultimately divorced him. We ended up leaving Zambia and relocating to her home country of Namibia. It was there that she made a fateful decision, one that would alter the course of my life forever. In her relentless pursuit of wealth, she chose to dedicate me to the kingdom of darkness, to Satanism, where she was already deeply entrenched. I was just a baby when she initiated me, far too young to grasp the gravity of what was happening. As a result, I grew up completely unaware of the darkness that had been cast over my life. Things began to shift when I turned 7. I started to notice strange and unsettling occurrences in my life. I was constantly rejected by others. It seemed as if no one at school wanted anything to do with me. It was as if an invisible barrier surrounded me, pushing everyone away without explanation. But the most bizarre and disturbing part of my daily life was what happened every morning before school. My mother would hand me a cup of blood to drink. I knew it was blood, but for some reason, something within me stopped me from questioning her actions. I never asked why she was doing this, why she insisted on such a ritual. It was as though I was already under some kind of spell, simply accepting everything she gave me without a second thought. As I continued attending school, the difficulties only intensified. The rejection I faced became overwhelming, and eventually, it reached a breaking point. I could no longer endure the isolation and coldness that seemed to follow me everywhere, so I made the decision to stop going to school altogether. Desperate for some form of understanding, I turned to my mother, pouring out my heart about the strange and unsettling things happening in my life. The constant rejection, the cold indifference from both teachers and students, and the relentless feeling of being out of place, as if I didn't belong. My mother listened carefully, and then she sat me down and told me something that sent chills down my spine. She said, "You don't belong to this world. You belong to another world." At just 7 years old, I couldn't fully comprehend the weight of her words, but they left me deeply unsettled, echoing in my mind long after she spoke them. To further drive her point home, she reached for the Bible and opened it to Genesis chapter 12. She read aloud the passage where God speaks to Abraham, instructing him to leave his homeland and go to the place that he had prepared. Though I was too young to understand the full meaning of what she was telling me, the entire experience left me with an eerie sense of unease, as though I was caught between two worlds, neither of which I truly belonged to. I took comfort in the thought that what she was telling me came from a place of divine truth. But as time passed and I began to see things more clearly, I realized the frightening reality that the devil is a master of deception, twisting the scriptures to lead people astray. This is why it's crucial for us as Christians to study the word ourselves, because the devil knows it too. When he tempted Jesus, he quoted scripture saying, "It is written." He knew what was written, but he twisted it to serve his own dark purposes. This was exactly how I was deceived. By twisting the scripture, my mother unwittingly led me into a trap that would drastically alter the course of my life. As I grew older, my mother began to reveal more about the life she was leading. She explained that everything she had, her wealth, her influence, her power, came from the kingdom of darkness, from her deep involvement in Satanism. I was still very young, but like many children, I admired my mother greatly. I looked up to her and saw her as a powerful figure. Whenever I saw her wealth, the lavish lifestyle she lived, I would think to myself, I want to be like my mom. I want to be rich. My mother nurtured my admiration for her, but then she revealed a horrifying truth behind her wealth. With chilling calmness, she told me, for me to have all these riches, I had to kill people. As her influence over me grew, she continued to shape my beliefs in increasingly disturbing ways. She began to share details that were too complex for me to fully grasp at the time. She spoke of having sacrificed blood to the devil, and then delivered a statement designed to profoundly twist my understanding of good and evil. "The devil is a good person," she said. "The reason why people hate him is because he's so good. When you're good, you'll never be loved." Her words planted seeds of confusion in my young mind, making me question the nature of good and evil. I began to see the devil not as an embodiment of evil, but as a misunderstood figure, someone who was hated because of his supposed goodness. This shift in perspective left me grappling with a distorted view of morality, where the lines between good and evil were blurred. My mother then showed me the path to initiation. She told me, "Tonight, when you sleep, someone will come to collect you." I had no idea what she meant by that, but I trusted her. That night, I went to bed as usual, but something strange happened. I heard an eerie noise outside, like someone or something was out there. My first thought was that we were being attacked by thieves, so I tried to look out the window, but I couldn't see anything. It was as if the night itself was hiding whatever was making that noise. I turned off the light and tried to sleep, but then I heard a voice. It wasn't my mother's voice, but it was clear and commanding. It told me to wake up, saying,
"The time has come."
I was only 7 years old, and it was all happening so fast. The next thing I knew, I was experiencing something beyond my comprehension, a sensation of my soul leaving my body, like an astral projection. And suddenly, I found myself in a place that was completely unfamiliar and terrifying. It felt real, not like a dream at all. In this strange place, I was interviewed, given conditions, and made to enter into covenants. Then, as if it were part of a twisted ceremony, I was given a black gown and a knife. They told me that the knife was to be used for sacrifices. When I woke up, I was confused and frightened. It all felt so vivid. but I tried to convince myself that it was just a dream. I went to my mother and told her, "Mom, I had a dream last night," but she quickly corrected me. No, that wasn't a dream," she said. "That was the place I told you about. That's where you went." I was taken aback and questioned her, "But I don't have the knife or the gown they gave me." Her response was chilling. "Those things are in my bedroom," she said. We went to her room, and there they were. The very same knife and gown I had seen in what I thought was just a dream. Seeing them in front of me made it clear that it wasn't a dream at all. My mother looked at me and said, "The place you went, that's where I belong, and now these things are here for you." From that moment on, she began to teach me how to kill. It's heartbreaking to admit, but I didn't start by killing in the spiritual realm. I began by killing physically. My mother would send men to capture people who were out at night, those who were vulnerable and alone. They would bring these people into our house, and my mother, using the knife given to me, would kill them right in front of me. This was not spiritual, but horribly real. She would perform these gruesome operations, removing their hearts to sell them in the sea where they believed sharks, which were thought to contain valuable minerals, would be drawn to them. This became our twisted routine. After she killed, we would drink the blood together. It was horrifying, but at the time I was fully immersed in the darkness she had introduced me to. I wasn't killing on my own yet, but each act drew me deeper into wickedness, hardening my heart and pushing me further into the abyss. As I continued down this path, my initiation into the dark arts advanced. The first thing I learned was that my father had died, or at least, that's what I was told. I had never known him, never seen him from the time I was born, so I had no reason to doubt it. When I was instructed to give a sacrifice to the devil's kingdom, I believed it was just my mother and me against the world. I approached my mother and told her about the demand for a sacrifice. To my shock, she revealed something I had never known. "Your father is alive. He's in Zambia," she said. "Don't sacrifice me. Go and sacrifice your father. I'll give you his address and everything." With this new information, I left Namibia and traveled to Zambia. When I arrived, I found my father, alive, just as my mother had said. When I finally found my father, I was faced with an unimaginable task. I was told to sacrifice him. But as I spent time with him, I discovered something that completely shattered my resolve. My father was a man who had a deep love for children, and he showed me an affection that I had never experienced before. Despite all I had been taught and the darkness that had surrounded me, I couldn't bring myself to kill him. His love for me was too strong, and it made me realize that I couldn't go through with it. At my father's place, I also found out that he had remarried, and my stepmother was now part of his life. Unlike my father, she harbored a deep resentment toward me. She mistreated me, pushed me around, and did everything she could to make my life miserable. The contrast between her hatred and my father's love was stark, and it only made my situation more unbearable. When I told those that had sent me that I couldn't kill my father, they gave me an ultimatum. Either my father dies, or I do. It was an impossible choice, one that weighed heavily on me. But in those dark moments, I believe God had a plan for me. The Bible says that He knew me before I was formed in my mother's womb, and I hold on to the belief that even then, God was watching over me, preventing the devil's plans from succeeding. As time went on, I fell ill, and the pressure on me intensified. They decided that I needed to make a sacrifice, and the target became my stepmother, the very woman who hated me so much. The idea of ending her life became a way to escape the torment she inflicted on me, but it wasn't something that brought me any joy or peace. It was just another step deeper into the darkness. They taught me how to perform the act. I was given a knife and a mirror and instructed to call her name. With a mix of fear and dread, I did as they said, and to my horror, I saw her appear in the mirror. They told me to strike the knife toward the mirror. I was scared, thinking I might break it, but they assured me that nothing would happen to the mirror. When I finally struck, the knife passed through the mirror, and I saw blood appear on the glass. When I woke up, I was met with the sound of weeping. People were crying, and I had no idea why. Confused, I asked them what had happened. They told me that my stepmother was dead. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. What I had done the night before had taken her life. Afterward, I was informed that because I had successfully carried out the act, I would now undergo reinitiation. This was a different kind of initiation, one that was much more severe and dangerous, a do-or-die situation. I believe it was only by the grace of God that I survived it. There were about 500 of us going through this process, but only 200 made it out alive. I was among the few who survived, and that experience showed me just how real and intense the love of God is, even in the darkest of places. Those of us who remained were then selected for the next level of training to become voodoo incarnates. This was not a title given lightly. It came with intense training in the darkest arts. We were taught how to hear and obey the voices of demons, how to destroy churches, curse people, and commit every imaginable evil. The training was designed to make us completely controlled by evil spirits, full-time servants of the devil. Being a voodoo incarnate meant surrendering every part of yourself to these dark forces, living under their control every moment of your life. In this role, I learned how to kill and sacrifice. In the world of darkness, they referred to what I was involved in as the light way of sacrifice. They claimed that Christianity's path was a long and arduous way of sacrifice, contrasting it with their so-called light method, which, according to the Bible, was anything but light. My training as a voodoo incarnate was brutal and exhaustive. To graduate, I was required to sacrifice at least 80 people. This was no small feat, and it wasn't easy to achieve. I found myself moving from hospital to hospital, wielding the dark power given to me. As a voodoo incarnate, I had the ability to transform and impersonate others. I would take on the appearance of a doctor, infiltrate hospitals, and begin my grim work. With the guise of a medical professional, I would inject patients with lethal doses, causing them to die swiftly. Often dozens of people would perish simultaneously, leaving doctors baffled. They would be told that the deaths occurred under the care of a doctor who wasn't actually a doctor, but a voodoo incarnate in disguise. It was a horrifying game of deception that played out in hospitals, churches, and everywhere else I could infiltrate. In addition to this, we used the forces of darkness to cause accidents. By casting spells on drivers, we would induce sudden blackouts, making them lose control of their vehicles. The results were catastrophic, with many lives lost in tragic and inexplicable accidents. This was how we exerted our influence and spread terror, through every form of evil imaginable. Once I completed the sacrificial requirements to become a voodoo incarnate, I was elevated to the position of Junior Assistant Grand Master for the Eastern, Central, and Southern regions of Africa. This role made me the Junior Assistant to the Senior Grand Master, overseeing a vast territory. At just 18 years old, I held this title. Despite the power and status, I found that my achievements came at an immense personal cost, being entirely possessed by malevolent spirits. Although I was officially recognized as a Junior Grandmaster at 18, it wasn't until I was 20 that I received the material rewards, a house and a vehicle. In my role, I even infiltrated Christian churches. The strength of a church, I learned, was determined by the presence of God. Not all churches were susceptible to our influence. We targeted those where the spiritual activity was minimal or stagnant, attempting to disrupt and undermine their faith. The more vibrant and powerful a church's connection with God, the harder it was to penetrate and cause harm. In my role as Junior Assistant Grandmaster for the Eastern, Central, and Southern regions of Africa, we employed various tactics to undermine and manipulate Christian churches. We would even buy churches and install our own possessed pastors to spread deceptive doctrines, ultimately confusing and leading people astray. During this time, my responsibilities were extensive. As a Junior Assistant Grandmaster, I was expected to be active across multiple regions. Before achieving this rank, I was an initiate, a lower rank where one is assigned tasks on behalf of others. As an initiate, I carried out orders from those higher up, performing sacrifices and attacking churches as directed. Once I became a Junior Assistant Grandmaster, my role shifted. I was no longer dispatched to carry out routine assignments, but was given critical, high-stakes tasks. If junior members failed in their assignments, they would escalate the problem to us. My team and I would then take on these challenging missions, and if we failed, the issue would be referred up the chain of command. This hierarchical system ensured that the agents of darkness were pervasive and persistent, with representatives infiltrating every level of society. Wickedness has infiltrated every corner of the world. In North America, for instance, the Church of Satan, established in 1966 by Anton LaVey in Colorado Springs, stands as a stark example. This church, with its iconic goat head symbol and pentagram, rejects the idea of God as the creator of the universe. Instead, they believe the universe created God. Their use of the pentagram, associated with Venus, the so-called bright morning star, reveals their devotion to the devil. In Mexico, the Adatan school of witchcraft operates openly, with visible advertising and documented rituals. This isn't isolated to one region. Similar schools exist globally. England hosts Wicca schools, while Africa too is home to numerous witchcraft schools. The reach of Satanism and its agents is global, manifesting in various forms and locations. Wickedness is pervasive, and while the kingdom of Satan is increasingly exposed, the reality is that its influence is far-reaching, impacting every part of the world. Even in Africa, where belief in Satanism was once less prevalent. Satan often operates in subtle and insidious ways, rarely revealing himself directly. Instead, he seeks out individuals and situations where he can exert his influence covertly. He doesn't come to you openly declaring, "I am Satan." Rather, he uses people and circumstances to carry out his deception and destruction. Satanism isn't just about committing acts of violence or evil. At its core, Satanism is the worship of Satan. Much like Christianity means being like Christ, embodying his teachings and values, Satanism involves emulating Satan's characteristics. A person becomes like Satan through their actions and choices, such as deceit and manipulation. The Bible describes those who lie as having the devil as their father, indicating that their nature aligns with that of Satan. If one's father is the devil, then one adopts the devil's traits and practices. Thus, a Satanist is someone who follows and imitates Satan, living out the principles and behaviors associated with him. Just as Christianity means being Christ-like, a follower of Christ who embodies his teachings and character, Satanism works in a similar way. Satanism means being like Satan, adopting his ways and mindset. How does someone become like Satan? It happens when a person starts doing the things Satan does. For example, lying is one of the traits associated with Satan. The Bible even says that those who tell lies have the devil as their father. If Satan is your father, then you're also like him. You can't have Satan as your father and be something different. You take on the characteristics and title of your father. So in essence, a Satanist is someone who follows Satan, living in a way that reflects Satan's nature and actions. Many people embody Satan's influence in different ways, each representing him through their actions, often without realizing the full extent of their alignment with evil. For some, this representation comes through something as seemingly common as gossip, where they spread lies and discord, feeding into Satan's desire to sow division among people. Others take a darker path, becoming serial killers, taking lives without remorse, driven by a deeper, more malevolent force. There are also those who destroy marriages, tearing apart families, or who engage in adultery, violating sacred vows and creating pain and chaos. Each of these sins, whether it be lying, stealing, or infidelity, signifies a person who is, in essence, working for Satan. They may not realize it, but their actions align them with his mission, making them active participants in his efforts to corrupt and destroy. However, when we speak of advanced Satanism or becoming a voodoo incarnate, we're talking about something far more sinister and deliberate. This is when an individual consciously chooses to go beyond common sins, feeling that lying, stealing, or even killing with poison is no longer sufficient. They seek to dive deeper into darkness, to fully understand and serve Satan in a way that surpasses mere sinful behavior. It's a step where they reject any belief in God, turning their faith entirely towards Satan, committing themselves to his will with full awareness and intent. At this level, They are no longer just influenced by evil. They are willingly embracing it, seeking power through their allegiance to Satan. People have gone to terrifying lengths, even selling their souls to the devil, seeking temporary pleasures and false promises. There is a disturbing reality that exists in the dark corners of the internet, a website dedicated to demons. This site is not just a myth or a figment of someone's imagination. It is a place where people willingly offer themselves to the forces of darkness. On this website, you can find pictures of those who have made this sinister pact, individuals who have decided to trade their eternal souls for fleeting rewards. The process is chillingly formal. There is even an application form where people declare their intent to sell their souls. They boldly list their favorite sins as if applying for a job. Whether it's indulging in pornographic content, harboring hatred, or spewing insults, these individuals openly confess the sins they are most drawn to. In return, they are promised a monthly payment, a grotesque incentive for their allegiance to darkness. However, this isn't a one-time deal. The commitment is monitored closely. The agents of Satan ensure that these individuals keep their end of the bargain, constantly engaging in the sins they've pledged to, further entrenching themselves in a cycle of evil. This level of Satanism is not just about engaging in sinful acts, but involves a complete and deliberate surrender of one's soul to darkness. The devil's strategy is clear: to ensnare you with something that delights the senses, something that seems to satisfy your desires, so that your attention shifts from the Creator to the creation. Thank you for listening to today's testimony. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing and pressing the thumbs up button. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments section below. As always, links to the original testimony are found in the description of this video. We look forward to seeing you for the next one. Until then, may the Lord be